I moved back home, but my stepmom stole my room. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. My name is Samantha, and up until 2 weeks ago, I thought my life was going pretty well. I had a stable job at Westfield Financial Group, a Fortune 500 company with offices across the country. I lived in a cozy apartment in Boston with my boyfriend of 3 years, Daniel. Daniel and I met during my senior year of college, and things moved fast. After graduation, I landed my dream job as a financial analyst, and when I upgraded to a bigger apartment, he moved in with me. I thought we were building a future together, until the night everything came crashing down. It was my coworker Madison's birthday, one of my closest friends in Boston. She was hosting a party at an upscale bar downtown, the kind of place with dim lighting, plush booths, and overpriced cocktails. The place was buzzing with energy, laughter echoing from every corner as glasses clinked in celebration. I was having a great time until I wasn't. At some point in the night, I left the group to find a restroom. As I walked down the hallway, my eyes landed on a couple tangled in each other near the coat check. The dim light barely hid the way they were pressed together, hands wandering, lips locked. I wasn't trying to stare. I swear I wasn't. But something about the man's profile made my stomach twist. A familiar tilt of his head. The way his hands rested on her waist. And then he moved slightly. A sickening wave of realization crashed over me. It was Daniel. My Daniel. With his hands all over some blonde woman I had never seen before. I stood there frozen. My heart pounded in my ears so loudly I could barely hear the music from the other room. My brain struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing, like it was refusing to process the betrayal unfolding right in front of me. Then, suddenly, the shock morphed into pure, blinding rage. "Are you kidding me?" I exploded, my voice slicing through the low hum of the hallway. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Daniel jumped back like he'd been caught committing a crime, which in a way he had. His eyes widened in panic as he looked at me. "As Samantha, this isn't." I let out a hollow laugh. "Don't you dare say this isn't what it looks like. Because it looks exactly like my boyfriend cheating on me at my friend's birthday party." My voice was shaking, but I held my ground. Daniel reached for me. "Please, let's go home and talk about this. I can explain." I took a step back, shaking my head in disgust. "Home? You mean my apartment? The one I pay for? The one you've been living in for free because I was stupid enough to believe you actually loved me." My chest was heaving, fury burning through me like wildfire. Silence. Guilt flashed across his face, but I didn't give him a chance to speak. "I want your stuff out of my apartment by tomorrow." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked straight out of the bar. Daniel called my name, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Madison ran after me, hailing a cab as I stood on the sidewalk, fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I was too angry to cry. The tears would come later, when I was alone in the apartment, surrounded by the things he had left behind. The reminders of how much of a fool I had been. But for now, I was done. Picking up the pieces, a life that no longer felt like mine. For the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into work. I took on extra projects, stayed late at the office, and drowned myself in spreadsheets and financial reports. Anything to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, I couldn't escape the emptiness waiting for me at home. Not because I missed Daniel, the anger was still too fresh for that, but because I suddenly realized something unsettling. I had no real ties to Boston. Yes, I had a good job. Yes, I had some friends. But my home? That was somewhere else. Pinebrook, a quiet little town in upstate New York. The place where I grew up. The house my dad built with his own hands. The house he had left to me when he passed away. 8 years ago, cancer took my father from me. I was just 19, a sophomore in college, when I got the dreaded phone call. It was 3 a.m. "Samantha, honey, you need to come home. Now." By the time I made the 6-hour drive back, it was too late. He was already gone. After the funeral, I went back to school and tried to focus on my future. My mom stayed in the house alone for about a year, until she called me with a bombshell. She was getting remarried. His name was Richard. He had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Emily and Jacob, who were 17 and 15 at the time. I wasn't thrilled about the idea. It felt too soon after losing Dad, and the thought of complete strangers living in our family home made my skin crawl. But Mom pleaded with me. "He's a good man, Sam. He makes me happy. I don't want to be alone anymore." What was I supposed to say to that? So I agreed. I'll let them move in. But after graduation, when I had the chance to move back home, I didn't. Not just because of my job in Boston, but because I had started feeling like a guest in my own house. The few times I visited for the holidays, it was clear where I stood. Mom was busy with Richard and his kids. They were polite but distant. I was an outsider in my own home. And now, sitting alone in my half-empty apartment in Boston, scrolling through my phone and ignoring Daniel's pathetic attempts at an apology, I made a decision. I was going home. For real this time. My company had a branch in Albany, just a 30-minute drive for Pinebrook. If I could transfer there, I could finally reclaim my house and start fresh. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office. "Sam," Mike said, leaning back in his chair. "What's on your mind?" "I need to request a transfer to the Albany branch," I said, getting straight to the point. He studied me for a long moment before sighing. "You're one of our best analysts. I'd hate to lose you entirely, but let me see what I can do." 3 days later, he called me into his office with an answer. "I made some calls. They're willing to take you at the Albany office. It's a small pay cut, but you'll have a job waiting for you." A pay cut? I didn't even care. The cost of living in Pinebrook was nothing compared to Boston. That night, I picked up the phone and called my mom. She answered on the second ring. "Sam, hey sweetie, how are you?" "Mom, I have news," I said, feeling a flicker of excitement. "I'm moving back home." A pause. "Oh," I frowned. "In about 2 weeks. I just wanted to let you know so you can get my room ready." Another pause. Longer this time. "Your room?" I felt a prickle of unease. "Yeah, my old room." "Well, sweetheart," she cleared her throat. "Emily's been using that room since she started college. She, kind of made it hers." I swallowed hard. "She'll have to move to one of the other bedrooms then." I kept my voice calm, though irritation bubbled beneath the surface. "It's still my house, Mom." Of course, she said quickly. "It's just unexpected, but we'll be happy to have you home." Something in her voice made my stomach twist, like she was saying the words, but not really meaning them. I forced a smile. "Great. I'll see you soon." But as I hung up the phone, that uneasy feeling lingered. This wasn't going to be as simple as I'd hoped. Returning home, or so I thought. The next 2 weeks flew by in a blur. I terminated my lease, sold most of my furniture, and packed everything that mattered into boxes. My friends threw me a small goodbye party at our favorite bar, deliberately not the one where I caught Daniel cheating. Then before I knew it, I was on the road. The drive to Pinebrook took nearly 6 hours. As I pulled onto Maple Street, my stomach twisted into a knot of nerves. And then there it was. My house. The 2-story colonial home my dad had designed himself. The blue paint looked a little darker than I remembered, the flower beds, once meticulously maintained by my mom, now slightly overgrown. It was strange. It looked the same, but felt different. I barely had time to process the moment before the front door swung open. Mom stepped out onto the porch. She looked older than when I last saw her at Christmas. New lines around her eyes, more gray in her brown hair. But when she saw me, she smiled and opened her arms. "Samantha," she said warmly, walking toward me. "Welcome home." I hugged her, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla perfume. It smelled like childhood, like safety, like the home I remembered. But as I pulled away, I saw Richard standing in the doorway. Tall, thinning hair. That same unreadable expression he always had. "Sam," he greeted me with a nod, his gaze shifting to my packed car. "Looks like you brought your whole life with you." I forced a small smile. "Just the essentials." He grunted, didn't offer to help with my bags. Mom cleared her throat. Emily moved her things to the guest room. "Your old room is ready." I caught the look she shot at Richard. It was subtle, but something about it made my stomach turn. Something was off, but I pushed the thought away and grabbed my bags. I was home now, and that was all that mattered. Strangers in my own home. Walking through the house was like stepping into a distorted version of my childhood. The walls were the same color. The layout hadn't changed, But the furniture was different, rearranged. The decorations I grew up with gone, replaced by things I didn't recognize. As I passed the dining room, I heard footsteps from upstairs. Emily and Jacob appeared at the top of the stairs. Jacob, now 17 and nearly 6 feet tall, gave me a casual nod. Hey, I replied, taken aback by how much he'd grown. You got tall. Emily, now 19, stood with her arms crossed. She wore designer clothes, her nails freshly manicured. Unlike Jacob, she wasn't even pretending to be polite. So, you're actually staying, she said, voice dripping with annoyance. Mom shot her a warning glance. Emily, what? It's not like it's a secret. Emily scoffed. She's moving in. I had to spend all day moving my stuff to that tiny guest room. I took a deep breath. Don't engage. It's good to see you too, Emily, I said with forced calm. Dinner that night was tense. Richard talked about his job at the local bank. Jacob mumbled one-word answers when spoken to. Emily barely touched her food, occasionally glaring at me across the table. Then Richard cleared his throat. So, Sam, he said, setting his fork down, how long do you think you'll be staying? I froze mid-bite. I set my fork down carefully. I'm not staying. I'm moving back. This is my permanent home now. Silence. Mom and Richard exchanged a glance. Right, Richard said slowly. It's just that we've gotten used to certain arrangements around here. I forced a tight smile. I'm sure we can all adjust. Emily suddenly slammed her fork down. I had to give up the biggest bedroom because of you, she snapped. I've been using it for 2 years, and now I'm crammed into that closet of a guest room. I waited for Mom or Richard to say something, to remind her that this was my house, my room, but neither of them said a word. I let out a slow breath and leaned forward. Actually, I said, my voice dangerously calm. This entire house belongs to me. Dad left it to me in his will. So technically, I could choose any room I want. Emily's face turned red. She shoved her chair back so hard it nearly toppled over. I had everything set up in that room for college. My desk, my vanity, everything. And now I'm supposed to shove it all into a room half the size because Princess Samantha decided to grace us with her presence. She stormed off, slamming her door so hard the dishes rattled. I expected Richard to say something, to scold her, tell her to respect me in my own house. Instead, Mom turned to me with a reproachful look. Did you have to antagonize her? She asked quietly. I stared at her in disbelief. Antagonize her? I repeated. Mom, she's been complaining about me since I walked through the front door. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. Let's not do this tonight. You're tired from the drive. Things will look better in the morning. I wanted to believe her, but deep down I knew things weren't going to get better. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Unwelcome in my own home. Morning didn't make things better. If anything, it made them worse. I started my new job at the Albany branch, throwing myself into work like I had back in Boston. It was different, smaller, but familiar enough that I adjusted quickly. My boss appreciated my experience, and within weeks, I was already being considered for a team lead position. But every night, I dreaded coming home. The tension in the house was palpable. Richard barely spoke to me. Jacob ignored me. Emily made her resentment known in every passive-aggressive way possible, slamming doors, rolling her eyes, scoffing any time I so much as breathed in her direction. And Mom? She just let it happen. Most nights, I ate dinner quickly and retreated to my room. Other times, I went out with Megan, my best friend from high school, who is now working as a nurse at the local hospital. Being around her was a relief, a reminder that I had people in this town who actually wanted me around. I told her about the situation at home over coffee one evening. They're acting like I'm intruding in my own house, I muttered, stirring my latte aggressively. Emily threw a fit because she had to move out of my room. Richard keeps making comments about adjustments. And Mom? She just sits there and lets them treat me like a stranger. Megan frowned. That's insane. It's literally your house. Exactly, I sighed. I thought coming home would give me a fresh start. Instead, I feel more like an outsider than ever. Megan shook her head. Maybe they just need time to adjust. I wanted to believe that. But deep down, I knew better. The birthday party ultimatum. 2 weeks after I moved back, I walked into the house after work to find Emily decorating the living room, hanging streamers, setting up balloons, and laying out party favors on the dining table. I set down my laptop bag. "What's all this?" She barely glanced at me. "My birthday party is on Saturday." "That's cool," I said, trying to be polite despite her attitude. "Should I get you a gift or something?" Emily let out a snort. "No need. You won't be here." I blinked. "Excuse me." Before she could answer, Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Samantha, honey, can I talk to you for a minute?" She led me to the back porch, the same porch where we used to sit and watch the sunset when I was a kid. Now, it was cluttered with Richard's tools and gardening equipment. She took a deep breath. "Emily's having friends over for her birthday on Saturday," Mom said slowly. She was hoping to have the house to herself for the evening. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "You're asking me to leave my own house so Emily can throw a party?" "Just for a few hours," she said quickly. "You could go to a movie, have dinner with Megan." I let out a bitter laugh. "Are you kidding me right now?" I cut her off. "This is my house, Mom. I'm not going to be kicked out so Emily can have a party." Mom's expression tightened. "Please don't make this difficult. Things have been tense enough since you moved back." I stared at her, disbelieving. "Whose fault is that, Mom?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "You all act like I'm intruding when I'm the one who owns this house." Mom's face fell. "I thought you might do this as a favor to me." That hurt. It shouldn't have, but it did. I exhaled, forcing myself to stay calm. "I won't make a scene at Emily's party. I'll stay in my room. But I'm not leaving." Mom looked disappointed but nodded. "I'll let Emily know." Dinner that night was unbearable. Emily made a big show of sighing dramatically. "I guess I'll just have to move my party to Luciano's since some people," she shot a death glare at me, "won't compromise." Richard muttered something about the cost of restaurant parties, and Jacob, as usual, looked bored with the whole thing. I bit my tongue, focused on my plate, and said nothing. Let them be mad. I wasn't going to leave my own house just to make Emily happy. The final straw. On Saturday, Emily and her friends went to Luciano's for her birthday. The house was blissfully quiet. For the first time since moving back, I felt at peace in my own home. I curled up on the couch in my pajamas, watching old movies and eating takeout. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself think. Maybe things would settle down. Maybe I could actually make this work. I was wrong, because 2 months later, Mom and Richard dropped a bomb on me. I walked into the house after work one evening to find them sitting at the dining table, a stack of papers in front of them. The air felt off. Mom looked nervous. Richard looked determined. I slowly set my bag down. "What's going on?" Mom slid the papers toward me. "Utility bills, water, electricity, heating. We need to discuss the financial situation here," she said carefully. I frowned. "What about it?" Richard cleared his throat. "Since you moved back, our expenses have gone up. Water, electricity. I contribute to the grocery fund," I reminded them. "I give you $300 a month. That's more than my share of the food." Mom and Richard exchanged a look. "That's just for food," Mom said. "It doesn't cover the other expenses." I felt a sudden chill. "What exactly are you saying?" Richard leaned forward, his face unreadable. "We think it would be fair if you paid rent." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Rent?" My voice rose in disbelief. "You want me to pay rent for my own house?" Richard didn't flinch. $1,000 a month. Silence. I stared at them, waiting for one of them to laugh, to tell me this was some kind of sick joke. Neither of them did. My voice dropped to a whisper. "This house belongs to me. Dad left it to me." Richard's face hardened. "Listen, young lady," he said coolly. "We've been maintaining this house for 8 years while you were off living your life in Boston. We paid the property taxes, fixed the roof. I never asked you to do that," I shot back. "And I offered to help with expenses, but Mom always said you had it covered." I turned to her, my voice smaller now. "Mom, you can't be serious." She looked away, and right then I knew she had already made her choice. And it wasn't me. The counteroffer they never saw coming. I left the dining room before they could see the tears threatening to spill. I climbed the stairs, walked into my room, and sat on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. They wanted me to pay rent for my own house. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest. I had spent years believing my mother had my back, that no matter what, I had a home waiting for me. But now, she had chosen Richard, chosen his family, chosen their comfort over her own daughter. Sleep didn't come that night. I tossed and turned, my thoughts running in circles. By morning, the tears were gone, replaced by anger, by resolve. I dressed for work like normal, but as I headed downstairs for breakfast, I was ready. And I wasn't backing down. The whole family was already at the kitchen table. Mom, Richard, Emily, Jacob. They all looked up when I walked in. Emily smirked, stirring her coffee. "So," she said sweetly, "when are you going to start paying rent? Or are you moving out?" I set my mug down carefully and looked each of them in the eye. "Actually," I said calmly, "I've made a decision." Silence. Even Emily's smirk faltered. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "This house belongs to me," I said. "Dad left it to me in his will. And everyone living here right now, you're here because I allow it." Richard opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "Starting next month," I continued, "I'll be implementing a new arrangement. I'll let the words sink in before I drop the bomb. Each of you, Mom, Richard, Emily, and Jacob, will pay $500 a month in rent." Silence. Thick, heavy, stunned. Emily's mouth hung open. Mom paled. Richard's jaw clenched. "That's $2,000 total," I added, which, if you check the local market, is actually quite reasonable. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "You're joking." I took a sip of my coffee, calm despite the storm brewing across the table. "I'm completely serious." Emily's chair scraped against the floor as she shot up from her seat. "You can't charge us rent," she shrieked. "You're insane." I shrugged. "If you don't like the terms, you're welcome to find another place to live." Richard stood up, towering over me. "You'd throw your own mother out?" I met his gaze without flinching. "No," I said. "I'd charge my mother and her family a fair rent for a property they don't own." Mom looked shaken. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she looked down, like she already knew what was coming. 2 weeks of silence. For the next 2 weeks, the house was like a war zone. No one spoke to me. Mom avoided eye contact. Emily refused to even look in my direction. Richard was seething. I bought my own groceries, kept them separate. I did my laundry when no one else was home. I had become a ghost in my own house, and yet, I wasn't the one who felt unwelcome. I was the landlord now, and they knew it. Then one Sunday afternoon it happened. I came home from work to find Mom and Richard waiting for me in the living room. Mom's hands were twisted in her lap. Richard's expression was cold. "We've made a decision," he said stiffly. "You sit my bait down." "Oh," Mom swallowed. "We're moving out." A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. I crossed my arms. "When?" Richard's jaw tightened. "Next weekend. We already signed the lease." I nodded slowly. I expected to feel guilt or sadness, but all I felt was relief. Richard straightened his back, his tone almost challenging. "I'm taking what I paid for the washing machine, the dishwasher, the TV in the living room." I shrugged. "Take whatever you bought." He seemed annoyed that I wasn't fighting him, but I didn't care. They wanted to leave? Fine. I wasn't about to beg them to stay. The final goodbye. The next week was filled with the sounds of packing. Emily made a point to slam every door she walked through. Jacob kept his distance, avoiding the drama. Mom barely spoke to me, and that hurt more than I wanted to admit. On Friday night, Richard rented a moving truck. I stayed out of the way as they loaded up their things. Then, as they made their final trip, I noticed something. They were trying to move the grandfather clock. Dad's clock. It had stood in the entryway since the day he bought it from an antique shop the year I was born. "That stays," I said firmly. Richard frowned. "I paid to have it repaired 3 years ago. It wasn't working when your father died." I stepped closer. "It was my father's. It stays." For a second, I thought he was going to argue. But then Mom placed a hand on his arm and shook her head. They let go of the clock. And just like that, they were gone, reclaiming my home. That first night alone, the house felt strange. Empty. Quiet. But for the first time in months, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wandered from room to room, taking stock of what remained and what had been taken. The living room couch was gone. The TV was gone. The kitchen appliances? Also gone. But instead of feeling loss, I felt free. This was my house, and now I could finally make it mine again. The next morning, I drove to Home Goods and bought a new couch, a coffee maker, and some kitchen basics. I ordered a new bed frame online. I deep cleaned every room, opened all the windows, let in fresh air. I filled the house with my own choices, with my own life. On Monday, I walked into work feeling lighter. My manager even noticed. "You seem different," he said. "More relaxed." I smiled. "I am. I don't talk to my mother anymore. She never gave me their new address, and I never asked for it. I heard through relatives that she and Richard are doing fine, and that's enough for me." I spent years feeling like I didn't belong, like I was an outsider in my own home. But now, I reclaimed what was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.